They then set fire to various arms depots in the Czech Republic, spread disinformation across Europe, tried to push migrants across the border from Belarus into Poland, and of course then attacked the Skripals in an attack that very sadly killed Dawn Sturgis, but had it been raining that day, might have killed 10 to 20,000 people.
I sometimes have a vision of Russian troops invading our country, and 7 years later, after a public inquiry headed by a senior law lord about whether or not Russian troops invaded the country, it is decided that they did, and that we should send a strongly worded condemnation of Russia's actions to the United Nations. This week, a public inquiry concluded that Vladimir Putin authorised the Novichok attempted assassination of the former spy Sergei Skripal, and which resulted in the accidental death of Dawn Sturgis. At the time, the chair of the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Tugendhat, said the attack was, quote, if not an act of war, certainly a warlike act by the Russian Federation. Tom, of course, was later Minister of State for Security, and he joins me now. Tom, good afternoon to you, sir.
Hi, Rod. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all, though perplexed by the fact that people seem surprised by this conclusion from the public inquiry that this was ordered by Vladimir Putin. We kind of knew that then, didn't we?
We knew it very well then, and let's be absolutely clear, it was part of a very long pattern. You know, in 2007 there was the cyber attack on Estonia, then they kidnapped a couple of Estonian border guards, and they invaded Georgia. Then they attacked the Montenegrin prime minister, did kill Litvinenko using polonium, in fact, so much polonium that the aeroplane that carried in the attackers then had to be scrapped because it was too radioactive. They then set fire to various arms depots in the Czech Republic, spread disinformation across Europe, tried to push migrants across the border from Belarus into Poland, and of course then attacked the Skripals in an attack that very sadly killed Dawn Sturgis, but had it been raining that day, might have killed 10 to 20,000 people.
Yeah, and not just that. We heard as well from a brigadier general in NATO, the guy who's in charge of cybersecurity, that it's almost certainly Russia who's been behind the cyber attacks on both Marks and Spencer's, for example, and perhaps Jaguar Land Rover. So this continual hybrid warfare and acts of terror on our own territory have been continuing, and we seem, Tom, to have done nothing whatsoever about it.
Well, we've certainly done very little, and it's one of the great frustrations of my time, both as Foreign Affairs Committee chair and in government. We didn't get as much done as I would have liked, despite quite a lot of heavy pushing. The one thing I did get done was the new National Security Act, which makes it now a criminal offence to buy a cup of coffee for a foreign intelligence service, or to do anything at all to help them, which has led to more arrests than would otherwise have been happening. So you've seen a couple of Brits, very sadly, really stupid, traitorous Brits, who have taken a few $1,000s off the Russian state in order to set fires in warehouses and on establishments in the UK. But frankly, there's a lot more to do. You know, we should be exposing the hundreds of billions of dollars that the Russians are hiding around the world. And we should be very clear that oligarchs and those connected to them should have absolutely no place in the United Kingdom. Sadly, as you may know, some people are still travelling relatively freely around Europe. And the shadow fleet, which is not just how Russia pays for the war in Ukraine, but also a major environmental threat. All those green voices who somehow seem to fall silent the moment Putin is mentioned, is still travelling around our seas. So, you know, there's still a lot we could be doing, forgetting about what the United States are doing. There's a lot we could be doing on our own.
Yeah, but back when you were chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and indeed later when you were Minister of State for Security, and these issues came up, was it kind of accepted by your colleagues and by the intelligence services that we were sort of at war already, that this was war, and that something needed to be done to counter it? Was that accepted?
I think that's overstating what was affected. I think what most people's view was, look, we just need to avoid this escalating further. And I remember a couple of conversations I had where, what do you mean? They've used a nuclear chemical in London and a nerve agent in Salisbury. How much worse do you think it's going to get? You know, it's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, well, yes, and it started being extraordinary, I suppose you could say, back in 2006 with the attack on Alexander Litvinenko with, as you say, the polonium 2-0. And then the invasion of Georgia then, and so on, and so on, and so on. It feels to me as if we're a little bit like that rather overused metaphor of the frog in the saucepan, where the heat is turned up and it doesn't realise what's going on. Would you characterise us in that term, do you think?
My best analogy actually comes from Belloc, which he wrote a wonderful little poem, which Pale Ebenezer thought it wrong to fight, but Roaring Bill, who killed him, thought it right.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. We could always do with some more Hilaire Belloc on the programme. So thank you for that. What should we do now? We've just had a public inquiry which has said this was down to Putin. It was a terror attack on our territory in which a perfectly innocent British woman was killed, murdered, you might say, but certainly manslaughter at the very least. What do we do now? Do we simply say, gosh, this was wrong? Or do we actually take some form of action against Russia?
Well, look, I'm rather inspired by what the Poles are doing, actually. If you look at somebody like Radek Sikorski, who has spent quite literally all of his life fighting Soviet aggression and now Russian aggression, you see that there are options that we can take. Now, whether that's increasing our defence spending to make sure we're prepared, I don't just mean spending it on old technology, but actually spending it on new technology and on new ways of resisting Russian pressure. But also there's things we can do to actually have a real effect on Russia. Look, I was just talking about that dark fleet, those sort of unsafe crude carriers that are floating around our ocean, risking disaster. You know, under international law, we can seize those vessels. Now, for some reason, we seem to think that international law applies to us when it really shouldn't in areas like the Chagos, but it doesn't apply to Russia when it absolutely clearly should. Now, a lot of these boats are going through the Straits of Dover. You know, we do have a navy, we do have a role in the world, and one of the roles that we have is to defend our shores, our waters, not just from aggression, but also from the threat of pollution and environmental disaster that these will certainly one day bring. Now, I am also inspired by the work that actually some defence companies are doing in terms of rolling out things like the Type 31 and getting good orders from other partners in the Baltic. And by the way, just to give credit to the government, the deal that they've just done with Norway on fighting or countering Russian submarines in the Baltic is incredibly important. So they are doing some good things as well.
Can you tell me, because I've often wondered this, it's the question of an ingenue, someone who is perhaps a little naive. We've just heard that there are massive cyber attacks being coordinated either by criminal groups with links to the Kremlin or by the Kremlin itself against Western institutions and Western companies. Are we doing the same thing to them?
I won't comment on what we might or might not be doing, but what I will say is that we have some of the finest cyber systems in the world. We are, I'm afraid, relatively matched in various different ways by countries like China and Russia, and in various different ways they share technology between themselves. They don't actually trust each other very much, so it's not quite the same sharing arrangement as we have with others. But the reality is they do cooperate, and so what we're seeing sometimes is we'll be resisting a threat out of, I don't know, St. Petersburg or something like that, and a third country will be used as an intermediary instead. So just because it's not signed off by Russia, as it were, doesn't mean it isn't Russian. But you're right, there is a lot that we could be doing internally in Russia. You know, the subnational divisions within Russia are very real. You just need to look at the fact they fought a major war in Grozny, and there are still very, very large elements of resistance. Because let's be honest, Russia is still an empire. Russia is not a nation state. It's an empire, and it has occupied vast areas of the east and the south. China is now reclaiming various parts of the east, metaphorically. I don't know if you know, but Vladivostok used to be written in a Chinese way as Vladivostok, transliteration. The Chinese maps now use the old Chinese name for it, Sea Cucumber Bay. Well, if that isn't a statement that they don't really see Russian occupation of the East as eternal, then I don't know what is. And the number of young people from the East who are being sent to fight in Ukraine really shows that they are quite used to doing imperial policing, imperial soldiering, using their Eastern troops as cannon fodder.
Yeah. One other thing, it's been reported today, Tom, that the US wants Europe to take over the majority of NATO's conventional defence capabilities, from intelligence to missiles, by 2027. That's a year away, roughly. A new US security strategy also raises questions about the future of the US role in NATO. And a former NATO official told Times Radio it would be music to the ears of those in the Kremlin. What do you make of it?
Well, I'm always intrigued when people are surprised about these things. You do know the first person who told us to do this was Eisenhower in the 1950s.
Yes, indeed.
And every single US president since then has repeated it. It's just that Trump is the first one who very obviously means it. And, it is a bit rich when we have spent years paying for our welfare with the support of US armaments. I mean, it's not serious. And then we complain that the Americans don't consult us over Ukraine or don't consult us. Well, you've got to buy a seat at the table. You've got to earn your place. And if all you're going to do is whinge from the sidelines because you haven't bought a seat, well, guess what? You're not relevant. And there's nothing you can do about it. So, I'm afraid, much as I find the language in the recent US strategy document, frankly, pretty troubling in some areas, certainly where it involves European politics, I do think the frank honesty that a nation has the responsibility to look after itself is just one of those sort of basic things. I don't want anybody else doing justice in the United Kingdom. I don't want anybody else deciding our future. And if I don't want that to happen, then you know what? We need to be prepared to pay for it. And that means, yes, conventional defense, but it also means much more than that. It means intelligence, it means technology. And that's why I'm really concerned about what we're seeing at the moment. What we're seeing at the moment is a bit the equivalent of the DFID 0.7. Do you remember when DFID had to spend 0.7%? You sort of saw in March.
Yes.
DFID would throw money at the World Bank in order to meet the target. Wherever the money went didn't really matter, but they would, they'd meet the target by throwing money at the World Bank. There's a little bit of that now with the 0.25, 0.3, 0.35%, where people are sort of throwing money at the American manufacturers who've already got kit, or they're throwing money at old technologies that they can bring online quickly, rather than really thinking about what it is we need, what the next ship or the line needs to look like, the next aircraft, or indeed drone, or whatever it happens to be. So I'm a little concerned that we're going down that route again.